Welcome to Tell Me More Stories Told as podcast. Get ready, because today we're diving headfirst into a historical event that, well, it reads like a suspense novel, honestly, but with profound real-world consequences. The Bhopal disaster of December 1984.
Yeah, and we're going to try and move beyond just a dry timeline.
Definitely. Forget the dry recaps for a moment. We're going to unpack a narrative brimming with unsettling twists, crucial turning points, and a truly heart-wrenching impact that, continues to resonate even today.
Our mission on this deep dive really is to cut through the complexities and get to the core of what happened in Bhopal.
Right.
We've gathered a range of information to try and paint a clear, insightful picture of the lead-up, the night itself, and, well, the long shadow this tragedy has cast.
Think of us as your guides, maybe, navigating the timeline, the science.
And crucially, the human stories. They lie right at the heart of this catastrophe.
Absolutely. To really set the scene, just imagine this. It's 1969, deep in the heart of India. A brand new pesticide plant has just gone up in Bhopal.
Right, Union Carbide India Limited, or UCIL.
Exactly, UCIL. Their main product was 7, a pesticide that was, pretty widely used back then. Now, here's a really critical detail for you. To make 7, they use this highly toxic intermediate chemical, methyl isocyanate.
MIC, that's the key chemical here. Highly toxic, highly reactive.
Extremely. So fast forward to the early 1980s. Demand for pesticides had actually started to dip.
Yeah, the market was changing.
But the plant, it kept churning out MIC. And this led to this massive buildup, this accumulation of unused MIC just sitting there in storage.
Like a silent ticking clock, really, right there in the middle of things.
And that's the thing. What's kind of fascinating in a really unsettling way is that this plant wasn't off in some remote industrial park.
No, as Bhopal grew, residential areas basically grew right up around it. It wasn't isolated at all.
Which just amplifies the risk, doesn't it?
Immensely.
Yeah.
I mean, storing such huge quantities of a chemical like MIC, it inherently carries massive risks for the surrounding community.
You'd expect incredibly robust regulations, right? Strict safety protocols.
Absolutely paramount. Or they should be, essential to prevent exactly this kind of disaster.
And, well, it's crucial for you to know that the UCIL plant in Bhopal wasn't exactly spotless leading up to that night. There were warning signs.
Quite a few, actually. Even before December 84, there were multiple reported leaks of dangerous stuff. Phosgene and MIC itself in the years just before. It's almost chilling looking back. These earlier incidents basically foreshadowed the big one.
Like little tremors before the earthquake?
Exactly. And it wasn't just leaks. As early as 1976, local trade unions were raising alarms.
About pollution.
Yeah, pollution from the plant. They were bringing to the attention of authorities.
So people knew, locally at least.
Some definitely did. And it gets even more ominous. There was a local journalist in Bhopal.
Oh, yeah.
He actually published warnings in a local paper. And one headline, it's just stark, it read, "Wake up, people of Bhopal, you are on the edge of a volcano."
Wow. On the edge of a volcano, that's incredibly direct. A direct prediction, almost.
Chillingly accurate, wasn't it?
When you hear something like that, it really hits you. How could warnings that clear just get missed or ignored?
It really underscores how important it is to listen, right?
Yeah.
To heed those local concerns, the people seeing potential problems up close.
Definitely.
And the problems weren't just, theoretical. By late 84, several really critical safety systems inside the plant itself were either malfunctioning or had been taken offline.
The very safeguards meant to stop this kind of thing.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The things designed to prevent exactly this kind of catastrophe.
Okay, let's break those down a bit.
Right.
What were these systems supposed to do, and what state were they actually in?
Well, okay, first up, you had the vent gas scrubbers. Their job was basically to neutralize any hazardous gases that might escape. Kind of the last line of defense against toxins getting out.
Gotcha. And they weren't working.
Not correctly, no.
Yeah.
Then there was the steam boiler. That was meant for cleaning out pipes, preventing blockages that could cause pressure buildups.
Also important.
Very. Also out of commission. And here's where it gets, well, really concerning. The refrigeration system.
For the MIC tanks.
Exactly. Designed to keep the MIC storage tanks cool, stable, at a safe, low temperature, it had been shut down years before.
Shut down? Why on earth?
Reportedly, a cost-saving measure decided by plant management.
Shutting down refrigeration for a chemical like MIC, that sounds, incredibly risky. Seems like an understatement. What was the safe temperature?
Well, safety guidelines recommended storing MIC at around 4.5 degrees Celsius. Keep it stable.
Okay.
By turning off the refrigeration, the temperature inside those tanks climbed way higher, anywhere from 15 up to maybe 40 degrees Celsius.
40 degrees, that's huge difference.
It's massive. And it dramatically increases the risk of, uncontrolled chemical reactions, hazardous reactions.
Yeah.
A direct threat.
That's just deathly troubling. It paints this picture of essential protections just being chipped away. And it gets worse with tank E610, right?
Yes, tank E610, one of the 3 underground storage tanks. In late October '84, just a couple of months before the disaster, it lost its nitrogen gas pressure.
Nitrogen pressure. Why was that so important?
Well, it was vital for a couple of reasons, impacting safety directly. First, it's what allowed them to pump the liquid MIC out safely for production.
Okay.
Second, and maybe more critically here, it acted as an inert blanket. It kept moisture and other contaminants out of the tank, contaminants that could trigger dangerous reactions.
So without that nitrogen pressure, the MIC inside, how much was it, 42 tons?
Without that, yeah, 42 tons of liquid MIC. Couldn't be safely moved or processed.
And wasn't there a rule about not overfilling these tanks?
Absolutely. Safety regulations were clear. No tank should be filled beyond 50% capacity. But E610, it was significantly over that limit.
So overfilled, no pressure system, no way to move it safely.
Exactly. It was just this convergence of multiple failures, neglected safety protocols, a dangerous chain reaction just waiting to happen. The tank was too full. The protective nitrogen was gone. The means to handle it were compromised.
Yeah.
A recipe for catastrophe.
And happened it did, which is devastating consequences. That night, December 2nd, going into the 3rd, 1984, the unthinkable. Water got into tank E610. How? How did water get into a supposedly sealed tank?
Well, the most widely accepted theory points to attempts to unclog a blocked vent line elsewhere in the plant.
Routine maintenance.
Supposedly routine, yeah. But it's thought that, combined with the state of the plant's pipelines, which were known to be corroding, that allowed water to seep back into the MIC tank. And even a relatively small amount of water under those conditions
Was enough to set it off.
Exactly. Enough to trigger a runaway exothermic reaction.
Exothermic. Okay. For folks listening, that means it generates its own heat, right? A lot of heat, very fast.
Precisely. And this reaction just took off, accelerated by all those things we mentioned. Contaminants already in the tank because the nitrogen pressure was gone.
Right.
The high ambient temperatures because the refrigeration was off. Even iron from the corroding pipes acting as a catalyst, speeding the whole thing up. The pressure, the temperature inside E610, they just shot up exponentially in minutes.
Terrifying to think how fast that spiral must have been inside that tank. And yet, initially, they didn't realize how bad it was.
That's what seems so unbelievable. Initial instrument readings, the ones indicating a major problem, they were probably dismissed by plant staff as just faulty gauges. Equipment malfunctions. Yes. And even after workers on the ground reported an actual visible leak, a decision was made to deal with it after their tea break.
Wait, after a tea break while this is potentially happening?
It sounds, well, incredible, but that's what the report suggests. That delay, looking back, had just devastating consequences.
I can't even process that, a tea break. And then, around 12:50 a.m. on December 3rd, the inevitable.
Yes. Under that immense, rapidly building pressure, the emergency relief valve on tank E610 burst.
So the gas started escaping.
Pouring out. Over the next hour or so, an estimated 30 to 40 tons of that incredibly lethal MIC gas vented straight into the atmosphere.
Straight out.
Forming this dense, deadly cloud that drifted right over the packed residential areas next to the plant, directly impacting thousands.
And those safety systems, the scrubbers, the flare tower.
Tragically. Useless in this scenario. Those multiple layers of safety, the vent scrubber, a flare tower meant to burn off escaping gas, even a water spree system. They were either broken, switched off for cost-cutting, or just completely undersized for a leak this massive.
So basically no protection.
Little to none. The layers of defense just weren't there or weren't working. A systemic breakdown.
And the warning, the siren for the city.
Ah, the siren. That's another absolutely critical failure with catastrophic results. It did sound briefly after the leak started.
Okay, so there was some warning.
For a moment, but then it was turned off.
Turned off.
It was apparently company procedure to avoid causing public panic over what they might deem minor leaks.
Minor leaks. This is the volcano erupting.
Precisely. So the vast majority of residents in the path of that cloud, they were only alerted by the horrific physical effects of the gas itself.
Oh my God.
The uncontrollable coughing, the searing pain in their eyes, the feeling of suffocating. That was their first warning. No chance to shelter, no chance to escape, just terror.
Imagine waking up to that in the middle of the night, not knowing what's happening, just this physical assault. And you mentioned MIC is denser than air,
Yes, heavier than air, so it hugged the ground.
which means
It means children, people who were shorter, anyone sleeping closer to the ground inhaled higher concentrations, making them horribly vulnerable.
oh, that's awful.
They got the worst of it. The immediate effects were just devastating. Excruciating irritation of the lungs, the eyes. People just couldn't breathe. And death, for many, came very quickly in those first hours.
What were the initial death tolls?
The official immediate count was put at over 2,259.
It's just immediate.
Just immediate. Many subsequent estimates suggest the true number of deaths in the following weeks, months, years, directly linked to the gas. Far higher. A staggering loss.
And the hospitals, Bhopal's healthcare system.
Utterly, completely overwhelmed. They were totally unprepared for a chemical disaster on this scale.
They wouldn't know how to treat MIC poisoning specifically, would they?
Exactly. They lacked established treatments. Specific antidotes weren't readily available. It was chaos. Hospitals, clinics just overflowing with victims suffering horrific symptoms.
The aftermath must have been unimaginable.
Mass funerals, mass cremations followed. The photographs from that time, they're just unforgettable. They capture the sheer scale of the human suffering. It's a level of devastation that's almost impossible to fully grasp.
Truly is. And the consequences, they didn't stop there, did they? The Indian government stepped in legally.
Yes, quite quickly. They passed the Bhopal Gas Leak Disaster Act. This law essentially gave the Indian government the sole power to represent all the victims, everyone affected.
Both in India and elsewhere.
Yes. And this set the stage for these incredibly long, complex legal battles that played out over years, both in U.S. courts and Indian courts, all fought on behalf of the victims.
And eventually there's a settlement with Union Carbide, but it's still controversial today, right?
Highly controversial. In 1989, years after the disaster, Union Carbide paid $470 million to the Indian government to settle the litigation.
$470 million, it sounds like a lot of money.
It does, on the surface. But when you consider the sheer scale of it all, the deaths, the lifelong health problems for survivors, the ongoing environmental damage, it's been widely slammed as just woefully inadequate.
And how the money was distributed, the relief efforts.
Also deeply controversial. The handling of relief, the long-term medical support, the cleanup. It's all been a source of ongoing anger and frustration for the survivors and their families.
And tragically, the health impacts. They're still being felt decades later. This wasn't just a one-night event.
Not at all. It's an ongoing public health crisis. Numerous long-term studies show consistently higher rates of chronic illnesses among survivors.
Like what kinds of illnesses?
Persistent respiratory problems, debilitating eye issues, neurological disorders, deep psychological trauma that just doesn't go away.
Still affecting people now.
Absolutely.
Huh.
And the impact on reproductive health has been devastating too.
Yeah.
Bhopal still has a miscarriage rate significantly higher than the national average in India. It's heartbreaking.
A truly awful legacy. And then there's the site itself, still contaminated.
Yes, it is. The former plant site is still laden with hazardous chemicals. They've leached into the soil, into the groundwater. It's an ongoing threat to people living nearby.
And the cleanup.
Painfully slow, riddled with challenges, bureaucratic hurdles. After all these years, the community is still exposed to these toxins.
It just feels relentless. But you mentioned resilience too, activism.
Absolutely. Amidst all this tragedy, there's been incredible strength. The disaster sparked major activism, both locally in Bhopal and internationally.
Fighting for what?
Survivors, advocates. They've worked tirelessly for decades, demanding fair compensation, proper long-term health care, and crucially, the complete cleanup of that site.
And raising awareness too, presumably.
Definitely. This activism has been vital in raising global awareness about industrial dangers and the urgent need for corporations to be held accountable to prevent this from ever happening again.
Now, as we try to understand the root cause, how did that water actually get into the tank? It seems there are conflicting stories.
That's right. It's still debated. The main viewpoint, often called corporate negligence, points to a whole combination of factors.
Okay, like what?
Things like serious underinvestment in safety measures over time, poor maintenance of the plant, a weak safety culture overall.
Cost-cutting over safety.
That's the argument. Critics say deliberately disabling or bypassing safety systems to save money directly created the conditions for the leak.
Okay, that's one side. But Union Carbide tells a different story.
They do. They've consistently pushed what they call a worker sabotage theory.
Sabotage, as in deliberate.
Yes. Their claim is that it would have been impossible for that much water to get into the tank accidentally. They suggest a disgruntled employee intentionally connected a water hose to a valve.
Wow. Do they have evidence for that?
They cite things like alleged alterations in plant logbooks. Some witness statements, they say, suggest unusual activity that night.
Hmm.
And they've even suggested at times that the Indian government might have, well, downplayed or suppressed this sabotage possibility in its own investigations.
So, two starkly different explanations, negligence versus deliberate act.
Exactly. And it really highlights how difficult it can be after such a complex disaster, especially in the chaos afterwards, to pin down the precise sequence of events with absolute certainty.
It's important people hear both sides, I guess.
Definitely. You need to be aware of both perspectives to really grapple with the complexity here. The ultimate truth might involve elements of both, or maybe we still don't know the full story.
It's just a moment to pause, really. Let the sheer scale sink in. The immediate horror, the decades of health problems, the contaminated land. It's a tragedy with such long, devastating consequences.
It truly is.
And, if this kind of deep dive, really getting into these significant events, if this grabs you, maybe take a second to hit that subscribe button.
Yeah, definitely.
That way you won't miss any of our future explorations right here on Tell Me More.
We really try to break down these complex, important stories in a way that's, engaging and accessible, cut through the noise.
So as we wrap up this look at Bhopal, what are the main takeaways? What does the story teach us?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's just a stark, sobering reminder of the potential human cost, the environmental cost, when industrial safety isn't the absolute top priority, when negligence happens.
The cost of cutting corners.
Exactly. It also shows how incredibly complex it is to assign responsibility after something this massive. And maybe most importantly, it highlights the incredibly long shadow these tragedies cast, affecting health, the environment, the fight for justice for generations.
It's definitely more than just a historical footnote, isn't it? For the survivors, it's still very real.
Absolutely.
Yep.
It's an ongoing story for them, still dealing with health issues, still fighting through activists for justice and accountability, the legal battles, the environmental issues. They haven't gone away. It's far from over for Bhopal.
And it leaves us with some really big questions to think about, doesn't it?
It really does. Maybe you consider this final thought. Decades later, the fallout from Bhopal continues. Ongoing health crises, contaminated land.
Right.
So what fundamental responsibility do corporations have for the long-term impacts of what they do on people's health, on the environment where they operate?
And what about governments, international bodies?
What's their role in ensuring real accountability? And crucially, in preventing future Bhopals? How do we stop this from happening again, anywhere?
Those are huge questions, with implications far beyond just this one disaster in 1984.
Profound implications. Ethical, social, economic.
Well, thank you for joining us on Tell Me More Stories Told Us podcast. We really hope this exploration has given you a deeper understanding of the Bhopal disaster, the causes, the impact, the ongoing legacy.
And if you're curious to learn more about this or other complex stories that shape our world, please keep exploring, keep asking questions.
And keep listening.